Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pro Football Historian channel. I'm your host, Flynn Gibbon. Today we'll be discussing the 2021 season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as well as their potential draft selection. So, Pittsburgh, I know not a lot of people thought of this team very highly, but they went 9-7-1, made the postseason. Again, another winning season for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. This was the last year of Big Ben. Uh, and he didn't really have a choice, but he knew it was the end just by the play. But they started off the season pretty good, and with the win over Buffalo, kind of an upset. The defense is kind of shut down Buffalo. Obviously, they had a special teams play in there, block punt, and even though Steelers wise offensively not a lot of success, only barely over 50% completion, 200 yards. Offense didn't do much, couldn't run the ball. With the spread out that Josh Allen had, the Steelers really knew it well. They really studied it well, and the game plan worked out. Kept them in the game, down on 10-0, get the block punt, and then the Steelers get on a roll, and they win the game. A team they lost to the year before. So then they play the Raiders. You think they'd be able to beat this team, but they always struggle against the Raiders in the last decade or two. For whatever reason, Raiders haven't had a lot of success. Both with playoff teams this year. But again, lost. They struggled on offense. Did have decent success passing, but couldn't run at all. And that was the problem with them the year before. In this game, the Raiders didn't have really any sort of run game. Raiders didn't have Josh Jacobs either. But it didn't matter. Henry Ruggs had the big play, 61 yards. And obviously Henry Ruggs eventually wouldn't be playing for the team. Is now out of the league. And you would think heading to jail or at least some type of prison sentence. Either way, that's a different story. They then play the Bengals, and they had an odd fourth down at the end of this game. Like a 4th and 10, they checked it down, and that was basically it. But the Bengals looked like the better team, and later in the year, they just destroyed the Steelers. But in this game, the Steelers competed. It just wasn't a lot of pass attempts. Again, couldn't run the ball. Had the ball a lot. They just 10 points for all that passing attempts and all that yardage. Not good enough. Jamar Chase caught a touchdown. Obviously, started pretty high in the season. Really had a great season overall, but 2 touchdown passes really, just great. Another touchdown streak. I think he had 5 in 5 games in a row to start the season with a touchdown. He had 2 in this game. Freiermuth did catch a touchdown, but rookie tight end, which is promising. They have him. Not a big Najee Harris person, but especially where they drafted him. But he could do everything, and if they improve the offensive line, it should really help them. So then they're 1-2. Then they lose another game. Green Bay. Green Bay's really struggled in that fourth quarter. I don't know if mental errors, but they could not close this game out. The Steelers just couldn't do much. They did have a good drive to start the game out. Green Bay, great second quarter. Randall Cobb catching a big touchdown. Aaron Rodgers had a run. I even thought some of the plays that should have been penalties, they had a tripping call. T.J. Watt didn't get called for. They took back or whatever, picked up. And that, T.J. Watt got the sack off that because of that. And, big things with the story of the season was Big Bang play wasn't great. Najee Harris played better later in the year, but still not great. The offensive line had some young guys. Pat Freiermuth looks like a good tight end. They got 2 really good receivers since they lost James Washington and Juju Smith-Schuster, who Juju got hurt pretty early in the year and didn't really play the rest of the year. And defensively, they had a lot of injuries. Still should be a pretty good unit going in next year. And, they got Mitchell Trubisky in free agency. So we'll see where everything goes. But then week 5 they finally pick up a win. The only win was against Buffalo, which is strange. And the Broncos, they did stuff in the fourth quarter when it gets garbage time, but still dominated this game. It's a good win. Big Ben played pretty good. They actually ran the ball well, surprisingly against a good defense. And also the big thing about the season was most memorable was the T.J. Watt had 22.5 sacks. Tied the NFL record since it's been recorded. Because really the record is like 26 by Al Baker, and even then it was Coy Bacon, I think 24.5, something like that. Either way, again, Steelers get another win in overtime. Geno Smith was the starter for the Seahawks. And again, the Steelers couldn't do much. Actually, surprisingly, Alex Collins had a pretty good third, fourth quarter. Steelers were really dominating this game, at least from a defensive perspective. And the Seahawks couldn't really do anything. They do come back, and then sack fumble by T.J. Watt put them in field goal range, and they basically kicked the easy field goal. Then they had a bye week. They played the Browns, so they win another game. It's a close game. It's not a lot I'm going to be talking about this game. There's a 2-point conversion. The Steelers did fail. Actually, they failed 2, I believe. So, relatively close game, and I thought the Steelers played all right offensively. One of them, not a great performance, but all right, pretty good. Basically, they ran for 2 because of the failed. They also had a failed field goal. I forgot about in this game. Sorry, just changed subject, but they had some miscues. They could have won bigger, and they shut down the Browns for the most part. Baker did not play well in this game. So now they have a winning record. And they play the Bears. Pretty ugly game. They allow the Bears to kind of come back. Bears actually looked pretty good in the fourth quarter of this game. So another game they had a weird stretch where they had some games that just allowed teams to come back and get close at the end. And then they had also a problem where they just didn't do anything until the very end, which we'll get to. But Bears had a fumble return in this game. They had a Mooney touchdown. Really 2 Mooney touchdowns, I should say. One was a run. And that's all in the fourth quarter. Again, if they don't kick 3 field goals, maybe they get a bigger lead. But because they were kicking field goals later in the game, allowed the Bears to stay in this and come back. But ultimately, they did win. Again, also was memorable. This game was some of the flags, or maybe should not have been flags. But again, that's another story. That's just what's memorable about the game in general. Again, it was the Monday night game. Then Big Ben has COVID. They play the Lions, goes overtime. Mason Rudolph didn't look that great. He's playing against Jared Goff and the Lions. The team didn't win, and they tie. Lions had the ball a lot. Didn't really have great success running the ball, but had some decent runs. That's the thing about the Steelers this year. They had some run troubles, and again, there was injury against defensive line. Tua didn't really play, if at all, if I can remember that correct. Hayward had injuries. They had injuries across the board. Even T.J. Watt was hurt. He didn't play every game, and still got 22.5. Just came in bunches against some division rivals like the Bengals and also the Ravens. Again, tie game against a bad team. That's not good, but they didn't have Big Ben. Play the Chargers. Game where they jumped out. Or did the Chargers jump out? Yeah, the Chargers jumped out. The Steelers scored 27 in the fourth. But still lose the game because the Chargers come back. Mike Williams touchdown 209. It was a great game overall. First half wasn't that great, especially third quarter wasn't, but Steelers hung on. And Big Ben had one of these classic games where he throws for a lot of passes It's usually pretty big yards. Not this game, though. Ended up 3 touchdowns. They couldn't run the ball again. And it's a team that couldn't really stop the run. And Justin Herbert did have 90-yard rushing, which is a little strange to see. But then they play the Bengals again, and this was, you're like, oh, maybe the Steelers are not going to make the playoffs. Because they didn't look that great most of the year, and this game was really bad. Scored 7 in the fourth, so really only 3 from most of the important part of the game. And that was 259, the Steelers scoring that. Again, the 2 interceptions, I think one was a pick 6, if I'm not mistaken. Mike Hill and a former Steeler. Again, they got dominated. Burrow did throw a pick, but they ran the ball pretty well. Joe Mixon played really well. And off of the line, did what they needed to. And again, T. Higgins had a big game. Jamar Chase actually didn't have that much he wasn't much of a factor in terms of the stat production, but sure he had effect on them trying to double cover him and stuff and make sure he didn't do a lot in the game. Play the Ravens. And this game comes down to some turnovers by the Ravens in the end zone, the interception, if you remember. And then it comes down to the 2-point conversion at the very end, which would also occur in the next game against Green Bay. But again, I felt like Ravens played some dumb defense, allowed the Steelers kind of come back in the game. Getting 17 again. They had 3 in the first 3 quarters and yet another 17 late in the game, and they prevail. Now, I shouldn't say Green Bay was the next game. That was later in the year. Sorry, not later. That was the Ravens, trying to go for 2 and not making it. But again, then they had this game. They don't do anything. Then in the third quarter, late, I believe, late, scored a touchdown. So it's finally 7-29. Get another touchdown. Get another one. Ultimate big pass they lit up against the Vikings. Get another touchdown. Get the 2. Driving down the field, and then it was like a pass breakup in the end zone, which even before the pass breakup in the end zone, which would have possibly made it a tie game if they got the 2-point conversion, they had the Claypool incident when he's trying to single a first down when the time going down. Again, it might have factored in the outcome of the game. Who knows? But Vikings prevail. They could not stop the run of the Steelers. I don't know why all of a sudden they kind of got away from it, the Vikings, and they couldn't just stay on the field really. And the second, you can say adjustments, whatever. Big Ben really played really well late in that game. Again, maybe it's just because they got in the spread and they just think, pass the ball all over the place, which Big Ben has done plenty of times in his career and done pretty well doing that. But it was almost one of those classic games, almost the biggest comeback argument in NFL history. Then they play the Titans. You could say a surprising win. They play similar styles, and Steelers just did enough. Again, there was some mistakes by the Titans. They allowed the Steelers to get back in the game because the Titans were dominating. And just some dumb calls and dumb turnovers allowed the Steelers to get back in. And they couldn't do anything. You look at the Steelers' stats. How they win this game is really the question. But they did. Even though the Titans dominated pretty much all aspects of the game, they screwed up. And the Steelers kicked a couple field goals. You could say a few field goals. And it was the reason they won the game. So you won a good game, a tight game against one of the best teams in the league, number 1 seed in the AFC. They play the Chiefs, they'll get dominated. Not much I could say here. Well, it looked bad overall, beginning to end. The second drive, it was. I think they scored the first 2 drives, Kansas City, and they had an interception. That's what it looks like. Maybe not first 2 drives, either way. Kansas City got hot. First quarter really was 14-0, and then they got 17-0, 23-30. Game basically over at that point. And they score a couple of garbage time touchdowns. By the Browns. It was a night game. Big Ben's last home game, I believe. And, they got a standing ovation, all that. But it came down to the end. The Browns get a 1 yard touchdown. They get 14-19. They don't get the onside. They try to stop the clock. And then Najee Harris gets a big run, 37 yards, and ends the game, basically. And then they go on the next week, play the Ravens last week of the season. The regular season, they're trying to get in the playoffs. They need help to win this game. Very close game in overtime. And the Ravens were also alive at this point, even though they lost 6 straight at the end of the year. And then they were hoping there was no tie in the Sunday night game, which didn't happen. We'll look at the stats. It's ugly overall. Not a very good or memorable game other than it went to overtime for Big Ben. That was his last regular season game. Then they go to the playoffs. Against Kansas City, I didn't think they were going to win. Didn't really give them a shot. But Kansas City did not look good early on. And then the Steelers had a fumble return start early in the second quarter. Get the lead 7-0. Then it became 7:35 mid-third quarter. And the Steelers, they scored 2 touchdowns later in the game. But that was Big Ben's last home game and last regular season. Overall, it was an amazing year. Threw 22 touchdowns, 10 picks. So the stats didn't look horrible. I'm going to assume it was a 90-some quarterback, or 86. So it was an average year, if you could say, for quarterback. It's not below average in the modern era right now. Below average passer rating, but for Big Ben's career, it's about average, I would think. And they had a good amount of game-winning drives in the fourth quarter. They just played it close, and they won a lot of those games. Good coaching and all that. Najee Harris actually had 1,200 yards, and they didn't really have a great rushing attack. And Harris also had 74 receptions. Again, it's going to be mostly Deontay Harris and Chase Claypool going into the next year. Deontay Johnson's the only one who got over 100 catches and over 1,000 yards. And Freiermuth almost had 500 yards on his 60 catches and 7 touchdowns. Let's go on the draft. They think he's going to take quarterback. I can see this happen. They might even trade up. I think they're looking at Malik Willis and possibly Desmond Ridder, which is surprising, but I think them and the Saints, it's kind of interesting, the same quarterbacks, I think. If the Saints even get a quarterback, which might not happen, but that's kind of where I see it. Otherwise, I don't know what the Steelers are going to do. I really think they're going to get a quarterback. And maybe Trubisky starts early in the year, but that's kind of, I don't think they're going to try to rush it. I think this is a good organization. They know what they're doing. And got a pretty good defensive unit. They got some playmakers on offense, and they're building the offensive line. So I really just see being a quarterback. They could try to get some younger guys on defense or some secondary guys or corner, maybe defensive linemen to help the rotation out or eventually replace Hayward or Tuitt or something like that. Still have Devin Bush at linebacker. Possibly get a second linebacker to help, who's a more that isn't like Highsmith or TJ Watt on the outside. And then besides that, maybe a receiver, but they got 2 good ones. Running back they drafted, they have plenty of capital in that since they spent a first rounder. Again, offensive line they could always look at. But I think it's going to be a quarterback. I think it could be Willis or it's Ridder. I think it's one of those two. Again, I appreciate you listening and watching. I'm just trying to think of the schedule. We'll probably do maybe 2 more. We'll do 1 more breakdown this week, and then we'll go into possibly a mock draft. We'll do some next week. Again, thanks for tuning in and listening. Hopefully you subscribe and like this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video.